And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you. Aquaba, welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Raster Report here on LIV Radio, LIV TV, here on livinginblack.com. My name is Kedia Wadu, aka the Conscious Raster. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live. We come at you from 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 12 noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. GMT, and 5 p.m. BST, and 8 p.m. East Africa time. We get together with you and we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives. We deal with entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity. That's Pan-African affairs and sustainable sovereign development. Today's date is Monday. It is the 28th day of July, 2025 in the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6265 in the latter days of the Kemetic calendar year 6265. Welcome to the seventh millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIV Radio, LIV TV, and livinginblack.com. Today, I have a lot of research to bring to you on a very, very important topic. I went across my bookshelves and I pulled out all of the relevant books for today's topic, which is population. We will be dealing with the clash of civilizations, just showing you all of the books that I was able to pull up. The clash of civilizations and the remaking of world order because of fertility. The clash of civilizations and population, human reproduction. Today, once again, the crisis of too few births has come across our research. We asked the question as to just how much of the critical news affecting the planet is driven by the issue of reproduction. As of 2024, population has peaked in 63 countries, including China, Germany, Japan, and Russia. And the total of this group is expected to decline by 14% over the next 30 years. The total of this now declining group, peaked group, I should say, will be declining by 14% over the next 30 years. In an analysis of 236 countries and territories around the world, 40 were estimated to have shrinking populations. I'll say that again. In an analysis of 236 nations and territories around the world, 40 were estimated to have shrinking populations, some declining by 1% per year or more. So we're going to look at countries with declining populations. We're going to focus on that right at first. And you will see some common elements. I'm going to be describing 10 of 20. I'm going to list the next 20. And then we will contrast that to what Africans on the mother continent are doing. Unfortunately, Africans in the Western Hemisphere, we're going to talk about Africans in across the diaspora. It's not pretty. But we will have real workable solutions that need you to cooperate. We need you to cooperate. You're going to have to go out of the house, find yourself somebody to love, and love on them real good, and make sure, especially to the younger population, you're going to find yourself somebody to love. You're going to love on them real, real good. Have some babies and raise those beautiful babies of yours to populate the next generation and to continue this process. We must teach our children to continue our process. I've got a lot of books here on the table. Some of the books I have on the table are absolutely nasty. really nasty. I am going to pull out, first of all, this book, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order. I have used this book so many times in my research, and it says a lot about population. And I'm going to go right to the parts it says about population growth from page 116. Let's talk about population growth, the clash of civilizations, and the remaking of world order. I'm in the chapter entitled Economics, Demography, and the Challenger Civilizations. Economics, Demography, and the Challenger Civilizations. This is a very lengthy chapter. And where do I begin? Oh, let me start right at the beginning of the chapter. Economics, Demography, and the Challenger Civilizations. Now, this book is published in 1996. There was evidence of this clash of civilizations at that time. There was a magazine that I read around 1992 or so, and it was called The Old World, how fertility was declining in the old world, Europe. Let's go forward. Now we are at 1996. This book then takes us to this: Economics, Demography, and the Challenger Civilizations. I'm going to skip a few portions of this because I have some of this highlighted and I want to point those out. And it talks about the Asian challenge is manifest in all the East Asian civilizations: Sinic, meaning China, Japanese, Buddhist, and Muslim, and emphasizes the cultural differences from the West and at times the commonalities they share, often identified with Confucianism. Both Asians and Muslims stress the superiority of their cultures to Western culture. In contrast, people in other non-Western civilizations, Hindu, Orthodox, Latin American, African, may affirm the distinctive character of their cultures, but as of the mid-1990s, had been hesitant about proclaiming their superiority to Western culture. Asian and Islam stand alone, and at times together in their increasingly confident assertiveness with respect to the West. Now, I'm going to skip forward to the next page. The Asian affirmation. The economic development of East Asia has been one of the most significant developments in the world in the second half of the 20th century. The process began in Japan in the 1950s, and for a while, Japan was thought to be a great exception, a non-Western country that had successfully modernized and become economically developed. The process of economic development, however, spread to the four tigers: Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, and then to China, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, and is taking hold in the Philippines, India, and Vietnam. These countries have often sustained for a decade or more average annual growth rates of 8 to 10% or more. An equally dramatic expansion of trade has occurred first between Asia and the world, and then within Asia. The Asian economic performance contrasts dramatically with the modest growth of the European and American economics and the stagnation that has prevailed much of the rest of the world. Now, I'm going to go forward. We're going to link this now as soon as we can to population growth. And I want to go to the section that deals specifically with population because I have probably 20 books on my desk. Let me try this one more time. Go to the table of contents, and it was page 116, I believe, population growth, page 116. So I'm going to skip forward to page 116. We're going to pick it up from there. Page 116. The impetus provided by the oil prices spikes, hikes failed in the 1980s, but population growth was a confirming motor force. While the rise of East Asia has been fueled by spectacular rates of economic growth, the resurgence of Islam has been fueled by equally spectacular rates of population growth. Population expansion in Islamic countries, particularly in the Balkans, North Africa, and Central Asia, has been significantly greater than that in the neighboring countries and in the world generally. Between 1965 and 1990, the total number of people on Earth rose from 3.3 billion to 5.3 billion. This is between 1965 and 1990. 3.5 billion to 5.3 billion, an annual growth rate of 1.85%. In Muslim societies, growth rates were always over 2.0%, often exceeded 2.5%, and at times were over 3.0%. Between 1965 and 1990, for instance, the Maghreb population increased at a rate of 2.65% a year, from 29.8 million to 59 million, with Algerian multiplying at a 3.0% annual growth rate. During these same years, the number of Egyptians rose at a 2.3% rate, from 29.4 million to 52.4 million. In Central Asia, between 1970 and 1993, populations grew at a rate of 2.9% in Tajikistan, 2.6% in Uzbekistan, 2.5% in Turkmenistan, 1.9% in Kyrgyzstan, but only 1.3% in Kazakhstan, whose population is almost half Russian. Pakistan and Bangladesh was over 2% a year. Overall, Muslims, as we mentioned, constituted between 18% of the world's population in 1990, 1980, and are likely to be over 20% in 2000 and 30% in 2025. And that is his prediction from the book, 30% in 2025. Let me just ask this of I do have up the AI search. What percentage of the global population in 2025 is of the Islamic faith? And that's going to give us an estimate. And as of 2025, approximately 24.1% of the global population identifies as Muslim, totaling around 2 billion people worldwide. 24.1%. Islam remains the second largest religion globally, followed by Christianity. This growth is fueled by high fertility rates in Muslim majority countries, a youthful demographic profile, and migration patterns in regions like Africa and Asia. Interestingly, while Islam originated in the Arabian Peninsula, and that's not true, the largest Muslim populations today are found in Indonesia, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, all outside Eastern Asia, or what they call the Middle East. So again, that prediction from Samuel P. Huntington from 1996 is likely to be over 20% in 2000 and 30% in 2025. So he, according to the AI search engine, he was slightly over for 2025, but not so far and not so hard. Not so. I'm not going to be hard on Samuel P. Huntington because he is actually predicting out 36 years, 30, no, not 36 years, 29 years into the future from 1996. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. I do see in the house we have my sister for Africa One is checking in, Hotep Brother Kitty, and Global LIB family. Pleasure to have you with us today, beloved. I hope you are in beautiful spirits. We're going to get to more of these numbers about population growth here in just a second. So that was the book, The Clash of Civilizations. Let's go through today's topic, population of the clash of civilizations and human reproduction. Now, as many of these books have it on, I have on my desk. You can tell just by the title where they're coming from. This book, entitled Population Decline and Power Politics, and the Remaking of Great Power Politics. Population Decline and the Remaking of Great Power Politics, obviously building on the same themes that Samuel P. Huntington was building on. This is one of the most shocking books, one of the most sinister yet honest books that I have ever collected. My teacher on this topic, Elizabeth Leon Gonsobel, told me about this book. She told me she found the book in a collection in a library in Tennessee. And it's a rare book, very rare book. I think there are a few copies available, but it's very rare. This is entitled The South African Institute of International Affairs has a conference on the international aspects of overpopulation. And on page 306, I know it a lot. I've been through it a lot. In this book, it says something so sinister and evil that you almost therefore cannot believe it says what it says. 305 to page 306. And I'm going to read it right now, just to let you know why I am so alarmed, so intensely focused on this issue of population. Many of you have had a focus for a long, long time. I hope that I have contributed something to your focus. This is what it says. I mean, the whole book is really sinister. It really is. This is what it says from the end of page 305 to page 306. It is necessary. I'm going to read one more paragraph than I normally read. Failure to deal with the problem. The problem is what? Overpopulation. Failure to deal with the problem, probably before the end of the 20th century, could entail the breakdown of national and therefore international order. India has already over 1.4 million unemployed. No, 14 million unemployed. Excuse me, but I'm straining a little bit because the font is so small on this text. India has already over 14 million unemployed. The United States, 5 million. In the United States, there are over 30 million poor. In India, over 500 million. By the end of the century, California could have 5 million unemployed among a population of 35 million at the present rate of increase. The existence of destitution or even of continued poverty among such numbers. Co-opt in decaying cities, cooped in decaying cities, whose urban sprawl cuts the poorer citizens off from any change year in, year out, could only lead to rioting on an even larger scale. Riots could be put down. No city can resist the ruthless use of modern weapons, but the casualties would be enormous. The government would lose support, and most governments in such conditions would seek to divert these subversive forces into external aggression. We see that happening right now with Donald Trump attempting to blame the problems that are being encountered across the United States on immigrants. Now, next paragraph, I'm going to pick it up where I usually do. It is necessary, therefore, to face the strategic implications. If an increasingly small minority of the human race continues to get richer and an increasingly large majority continues to get poorer in relation to each other, then the temptation to the poor to take a larger share must become irresistible. They might rely upon useful fifth columns in the richer countries, and they could afford much greater losses. The richer would be in a similar position to Israel among the Arab states. They could not afford to lose a battle, and a series of victories might bring them no nearer to security. From their point of view, the earliest and most drastic action would hold out the best prospects of success. I will repeat that last sentence. From their point of view, the earliest and most drastic action would hold out the best prospect of success. Any such action would, by the geographical concentration of the population explosion, be bound to take on the character of racial war, with the haves mainly to be found among the white races and the have-nots among the yellows, browns, and blacks. This division in itself could reduce the possibility of voluntary limitation at an early stage or acceptance of an imposed solution at a later. It has been characteristic of recent analysis of the population problem in an international context for the analysis to be clear and devastating. But for suggestions as to action to deal with it is to be so limited as to be unconvincing or so hesitant as to be disregarded. Time no longer permits this. If international action and drastic action is not taken soon, some country or countries will act to safeguard what they consider to be their vital interests. It is even possible that they might, like Dr. Strangelove, grow to love the bomb. So they're talking about nuclear war as perhaps the only available viable solution. Let's go into this topic. I have written again and again over many years on this topic. I know this topic very well. I invite you to please do hit the like button if you enjoyed today's conversation. I have written several books on the topic. This was the first one of the series of books that I wrote. Population War, Report from the Front Line. This is from the Conscious Rasta Report back in the days when I was putting it out as a quarterly journal or sometimes 7 in a year. Later in that same series of books I wrote, this one again is entitled Population War, Report from the Front Line. Where will we as individuals fit ourselves into a changing world? Will we be crushed by a machine which has been engineered to restrict the numbers of children entering the 21st century? Or will we anticipate these changes, make the appropriate adjustments, and project ourselves into a world where population shifts will make new superpowers out of nations that were once subservient and decrease the status and influence of today's mightiest countries? The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. The future also will belong to those who bear generations that will continue and build upon their legacy. All babies are precious. That's what I wrote on the back cover, a brief introduction to the book. The next book I'll put up, and there's really, in that time especially, I was very much focused on this, was one of the most important things that I thought we should be paying attention to. And so I next came up with this book a year after, 2 years afterwards, and is called Missing Assets: Cultural, Biological, and Psychological Origins of Infertility. Cultural, biological, and psychological origins of infertility. I have it up on the cover. It keeps disappearing behind the chroma key, but it is what it is. Here's what the back cover of this book has to say. And part of it is obscured by the not for resale ban. At that time, I would order author only versions of these, and it obscured it. But it says, a relatively small number of individuals are at the heart of this conspiracy. They conduct their genocidal planning and instigate their agenda with relative obscurity. Many of them are visible to the public, and their works are available for scrutiny, but the first part of their operations is to set up a mindset in their victims to ignore such actions. For most victims of this conspiracy, we have voluntarily bought into certain methods of reducing our procreation. We have accepted far too many of the attempted mannerisms of Western civilizations, of the complicated mannerisms of Western civilizations. We eat contaminated food, soak our bodies in toxic chemicals, engage in behaviors according to the designs of mind controllers, and offer our unborn children up to as blood sacrifices at the altar of abortion. Despite many couples' willingness to bear children, increasingly they are finding it impossible to fulfill that desire. Infertility clinics are springing up all over this country, seemingly as rapidly as fast food restaurants. A shocking number of people are being sterilized unwittingly. Much of this could be avoided if we only knew which dangerous activities to look out for. This report is intended as a manual for action. I encourage the reader to, number one, find an issue relative to developing our vital human resources. Two, declare a battlefront against those opposed to your own self-interest. Three, fortify yourself spiritually. Four, study the rules of engagement. And five, fight this battle to win. This is a contest we cannot afford to lose. This is a contest we cannot afford to lose. Now, this book is really, really good. I love this book. And there are a number of different quotations in this book I wanted to cite. Let me point to this one. And let me find it here real quick. And this, The Unwanted Child in Western Civilization. From the book, The Birth Dearth by Ben Wattenberg, what happens when white people, he meant people in free countries, he meant white people. It says, what happens when people in free countries don't have enough babies? That fits our theme today, class of civilizations and human reproduction. Ben Wattenberg wrote the following. Here is a list of factors discussed that tend to depress fertility: urbanization, more education, more income, more working women, more abortion due to legalization, better contraceptive techniques, delayed marriage, delay of birth of the first child, more divorce, increased infertility, increased spinsterhood, more open homosexuality, more open lesbianism, more living together, women's liberation, the perceived high cost of children, and environmentalism. So those 14 factors listed by Ben Wattenberg contribute to this problem. I write on the following page, page 22, in my lectures, I frequently cite the following excerpt from a critical report from the research group Information Project for Africa, titled Propaganda, Cultural Imperialism, and Population Control, Ideological Communications in the Southern Hemisphere. And here is that quote. For population control to succeed, a great deal more must be done than to merely establish family planning centers and to provide surreptitious funding for local advocacy campaigns. An entire spectrum of variables affecting the desire to have children must be influenced, from basic economics and government programs to family relations, personal expectations, lifestyle, cultural tradition, concepts of land sharing and private ownership, wealth, production systems, ethical standards, and even religious beliefs. Taboos must be breached. The bonds that unite family and community must be undermined, and sufficient disruption must occur to literally disorient the targeted pop communities and make them vulnerable to the imposition of external cultural forces. And it goes on. It's a very, very serious situation. And one more, I'm going to excerpt one more paragraph. It says, family, this excerpt is from Policy Determination, Population and Family Planning Programs. Says, quote, family planning, population control, seeks to influence human behavior. Motivation is therefore an important part of any approach to the population problem. This requires understanding of cultural, social, psychological, and economic forces. There is a lot to this, which has us, the next chapter then, has us studying the the psychological warfare campaign, the strategies, covert operation, psychological consolidation activities, psychological media, psychological operations or psyops, psychological warfare consolidation, perceptions management. All of these are critical topics as you and I would understand what is going on. Last excerpt from this book. This is such a good book, a book that you largely ignored, but it is a very good book. It says, lastly, to quote once again from my teacher, Elizabeth Liaga and Sobos, he wrote, nothing can be left to chance. To be effective, an intervention in the media must be thorough, careful, persistent, and extravagant. It must be capable of penetrating the minds of the audience at the subconscious as well as the conscious level. It must systematically create an illusion on a massive scale, while at the same time remaining discreet enough to give the impression that the false doctrine represents a spontaneous change in the target society itself. Whew. There's a lot to unload there, no doubt, no doubt. And then I did go on to document this happening in real time. In the book Fade to Black, The Passing of a Great Race, Fade to Black. It's a serious book. Unfortunately, the book is depressing. I wrote the book. When I finished Fade to Black, I was depressed because I really didn't see any way at all that we would turn this around. 14 months later, I released another book called Paradigm Shift that rose my hopes back up. The part of that paradigm shift was to abandon the West, abandon the diaspora. In chapter 16, I wrote the title of chapter 16, Collapse or Rebirth. Here's this quote from Sheikh Anta Diop. I begin the chapter with: thus, imperialism, as the hunter of prehistory, killed the being first spiritually and culturally before seeking to destroy it physically. The negation of history and the intellectual accomplishments of Black African people is the cultural and mental murder which has already taken place and has paved the way for a genocide here and there in the world. That from Sheikh Anta Diop, from Civilization or Barbarism. And the book is really, really good. I want to point out this one position here. And this book is very lengthy as well. So just pointing out one particular thing doesn't necessarily help us out. But I want to point out this chapter, which is chapter 2 of the book, chapter 3, The Myth of Black Lives Matter. I begin this chapter with a quote from Urban Meyer, the football coach. He wrote, "Now I understand. Average leaders have quotes. Good leaders have a plan. Exceptional leaders have a system." Then I talk about the superficiality of sloganism. That's not necessarily, but I do talk about killer cops are but the tip of the iceberg. So I go in to talk about killer cops, etc. But here's what I say on page 68 in the chapter, The Myth of Black Lives Matter. I do not intend to belittle these killings, police killings, cop killings, or to dismiss the suffering the families of the victims of law enforcement shootings experience. Human lives matter. Black human lives matter as much as any other ethnicity. Yet the reactionary national response to this unacceptable trend is vastly disproportionate to the toll of other policies that disrupt the lives of Blacks each year in the United States. Compared to nationally reported killings of our group's members by law enforcement actions, each year Blacks kill others of our group at a ratio compared to police killings of 8.85 to 1. Blacks killing other Blacks compared to cop killings, 8.85 to 1. Compared to law enforcement killings, bad medical practices, iatrogenics, kill Blacks at a ratio of 585 to 1. 585 to 1. Abortion kills Blacks at a ratio of 1,067 to 1 each year in the United States. Due to our failure to respond to these high attrition rates causing decimation to our group's demographics, I question as to whether Black Lives Matter is much more than a media propagated phenomena. Let us look deeper. Let's look closer at internecine violence, iatrogenic death, and voluntary abortion to confirm the data that underlies our analysis and determination. So I do talk about internecine violence, death by doctor, iatrogenesis, and abortion. The chapter goes on. It's a rather lengthy chapter. It's a rather lengthy book, Fade to Black, The Passing of a Great Race. I am today sharing excerpts from these various books. Let me go back to my research. We were talking about the top 20 declining nations in the world. I'm going to go to that list. I have it up on my desktop, top 20. We're going to begin with number 1, the fastest declining nation in the world, Taiwan. Estimated total fertility rate of 1.11 children per woman, the lowest globally in 2024, 1.11. It takes 2.1 children to replace ourselves. Taiwan is 1.11. The declining population is due to a combination of low birth rates and an aging population. The total fertility rate has plummeted from nearly 4 live births per woman in 1971 to just 1 in 2021. Economic development, urbanization, and rising living costs have made raising children financially burdensome, while women's increased participation in the workforce and higher educational attainment have delayed childbearing. Additionally, the population entered a general declining path in 2020, with negative growth recorded in 2020 and 2021, partially due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Great Reset, as they call it. The aging demographic, with the share of the population aged 65 and older, is expected to reach 37% by 2050, further strains social security systems and economic growth. Taiwan leads the world in population decline. Number 2 on the list, South Korea. South Korea's population is declining due to a combination of low birth rates and an aging population. The country's total fertility rate is among the lowest globally at 0.75, significantly below the replacement rate of 2.1, 0.75. Factors contributing to this include high economic inequality, the high cost of living, low wages, limited job opportunities, and rising housing unaffordability. Additionally, cultural shifts such as delayed marriages, and a preference for a career over family play a role. The government has implemented policies to encourage childbirth, but these have had limited success. The population decline is expected to accelerate, with projections indicating a potential 74% reduction of the population of South Korea by 2100. 74% reduction. You just cannot sustain a 0.75 total fertility rate per woman. Number 3 on the list, Singapore. And I welcome to the conversation. I see you in the house. Stray Godzilla is in the house on YouTube. He recently saw a comparison between the SCLC and Black Lives Matter. Pretty accurate. SCLC and BLM. Yeah, looking back in retrospect, neither the SCLC or Black Lives Matter turned out to be what we needed in our leadership. Personally, I think SCLC, comparing it to Black Lives Matter, SCLC was quite a bit more relative to what we needed to be doing. But in the long run, SCLC missed on the important things, such as sustaining our fertility, sustaining the family. SCLC, they did their best. Black Lives Matter was corrupted from the beginning. Black Lives Matter was led by a group of lesbians, and it also was being financed by George Soros from the outside. So Black Lives Matter never did belong to us, while the SCLC, which produced, of course, Dr. King and many others of the great leadership of that era, it was for us, from us. But even then, amongst the SCLC, they were at war with themselves. That's a great point you make. Both have Boule fingerprints all over it. I agree with you completely. Welcome to the conversation, Stray Godzilla. Great to have you in the house. We are also up on Rumble, where in Rumble I do see 4 African 1 has shared another note. I see young girls wearing physical and psychological destruction in their plastic hair, nails, and eyelashes. How do we convince them and their parents of the ticking time bombs they are nurturing? every means necessary. If I and you or anyone else can get these messages that I'm sharing today to these young people and to their parents, we must do so. We'll reach them on the platforms they're on. We have got to start to teach our children at a much younger age before they get corrupted. But I do agree with you. I see it, you see it, we see it in the plastic hair, plastic nails, all the psychological destruction. You are absolutely right. They're searching for identity. And unfortunately, the larger society does nothing, if anything at all, to embrace our African identity. It's happening in the UK. It's happening in the United States. The young people are hell bent on destroying themselves. I don't blame them individually. I blame this on the war going on, of which my generation, the older generation, I'm a baby boomer, has failed, absolutely miserably failed to address this crisis. I'm doing the best I can, beloved, but it's still far too little, far too late. And we are losing ground. We're going to continue to fight with no choice, to fight, fight, fight to win. Going forward, number 3, Singapore. Singapore's population is declining due to a combination of ultra low birth rates, an aging population, and reduced foreign labor inflows. The fertility rate has dropped to about 1.1 births per woman, far below the replacement level of 2.1, driven by living costs, career pressures, and delayed marriages. At the same time, the proportion of seniors is rapidly rising, straining the labor force and social systems. COVID-19 restrictions also reduced immigration and foreign employment, compounding the trend. Despite government incentives, cultural and economic pressures continued to discourage childbearing, prompting concerns about long-term sustainability and workforce shrinkage. Next, number 4 on the list, Ukraine. Ukraine's population has been steadily declining due to a combination of factors. Since the 1990s, low birth rates and high mortality have outpaced population growth. Economic instability and limited job opportunities have driven millions to emigrate, often permanently. The 2022 Russian invasion accelerated this trend, causing mass displacement, war casualties, and further drops in fertility. As of 2025, Ukraine's population has shrunk by nearly 10 million compared to pre-war levels. Without targeted policies to support families, encourage return migration, and rebuild infrastructure, experts warn the demographic crises could deepen, threatening long-term recovery and development. Number 5 on our list of countries with declining population, Hong Kong, a territory of China. Hong Kong's population decline stems from a mix of low birth rates, immigration, and political shifts. With a fertility rate of just 0.8 births per woman, the world's second lowest, natural population growth has turned negative. Political unrest and the 2020 national security law triggered a wave of immigration, especially among young professionals. Strict COVID-19 policies further accelerated departures. Many residents have relocated to countries like the UK and Canada, aided by special immigration pathways. Meanwhile, rising housing costs and limited job prospects discourage family formation. Although immigration from mainland China has offset some losses, Hong Kong's demographic landscape is undergoing a profound transformation. Number 6 on the list, Macau. Macau's population decline is driven by an ultra low fertility, an aging population, and reduced immigration. Isn't this consistent we see across that region? With a birth rate of just 5.2 per 1,000 people and a fertility rate below 0.6 births per woman, the lowest globally, natural growth is unsustainable. COVID-19 disruptions and high living costs have discouraged family formation. Meanwhile, the number of non-residential workers has dropped sharply, further shrinking the labor force. Although immigration once offset demographic pressures, recent trends show fewer arrivals and limited retention of foreign talent. The UN projects Macau's population will peak in 2032 and then steadily decline, potentially falling to 333,000 by 2100. Number 7, Moldova. Moldova's population is declining due to a mix of low birth rates, high mortality, and mass immigration. Fertility rates have dropped from 2.5 in 1989 to around 1.6 in 2023, well below replacement rate. Life expectancy remains low. Moldovans' life expectancy remains low, and the population is aging rapidly. Economic hardship has driven over 1 million Moldovans, nearly half the population, to seek work abroad, especially in the EU. Remittances help families, but long-term migration weakens social ties and shrinks the labor force. With deaths consistently outnumbering births and few immigrants arriving, Moldova faces one of the world's fastest demographic declines. Puerto Rico, number 8 on our list. Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's population is shrinking due to a combination of low birth rates, aging demographics, and mass immigration. Since 2005, the island has experienced a steady outflow of residents, especially younger adults, seeking better economic opportunities in the U.S. mainland. Births have plummeted from around 60,000 in 2000 to under 18,000 in 2022. Wait a minute, let me repeat that. Births have plummeted in Puerto Rico from around 60,000 births in 2000 to under 18,000 births in 2022, while the share of people aged 65 plus has doubled in just a decade. Natural disasters like Hurricane Maria and economic instability have accelerated this trend. With fewer children, limited immigration, and a rapidly aging population, Puerto Rico faces a demographic crisis that threatens its long-term economic sustainability. Wow, Puerto Rico, who would have thunk it? Puerto Rico, shrinking away. Number 9 on our list, Italy. Italy's population, which when Italy used to be known as Europe's bambino capital, babies, bambinos. Italy had a high fertility rate up until the mid-60s. Italy's population is shrinking due to a dramatic drop in birth rates, rapid aging, and persistent immigration. In 2024, births fell to a record low of 370,000, while deaths outpaced births by 281,000. 281,000 more people died than births. The fertility rate has plummeted to just 1.18 children per woman, far below the replacement level. Meanwhile, the working age population is projected to shrink by over 20% by 2050. The working age population expected to shrink by 1/5 by 2050. Economic stagnation, high youth unemployment, and limited support for families have driven many young Italians to go abroad. Without bold reforms to boost birth rates and labor participation, Italy faces a demographic crisis that could strain pensions, healthcare, and long-term growth. And number 10 of the 20 fastest declining populations in the world is Spain. Like Italy, Spain, a Catholic country, both are predominantly Catholic countries, are supposed to have positive growth rates. No, Spain follows Italy at number 10. Despite various governmental pro-natal policies, Spain's population is declining due to persistently low birth rates, rapidly aging, and uneven migration patterns. In 2023, births hit a record low of 322,098, while deaths exceeded 434,000. The fertility rate stands at just 1.16 childbirths per woman, far below replacement level. Economic challenges, delayed family formation, and high housing costs discourage childbearing. Meanwhile, rural depopulation and immigration of young Spaniards deepen the demographic imbalance. Immigration has helped offset losses, but not enough to reverse the trend. Without stronger family support policies and labor reforms, Spain faces long-term strain on pensions, healthcare, and workforce sustainability. Whew. Detailed explanations on the top 10 of 20 nations in the world that are shrinking. Again, as we said at the beginning of the show, 63 nations of the world have reached their peak population, and over 60 of them now are in this declining situation. Number 11 on our list, no more detailed explanations, just the basic facts. Number 11, Poland, total fertility rate of 1.32 childbirths per woman. Government subsidies aimed at increasing births. Number 12, Montserrat, TFR of 1.33 childbirths per woman. Small Caribbean island with a declining population. Number 13, Mauritius, total fertility rate of 1.36 childbirths per woman, experiencing a steady fertility decline over the decades. Number 14, Bosnia and Herzegovina, total fertility rate of 1.38 children per woman, reflecting post-conflict demographic patterns. Number 15, British Virgin Islands, total fertility rate of 1.38 childbirths per woman, another Caribbean territory with extremely low fertility. Japan, total fertility rate of 1.4 childbirths per woman. Despite significant government spending to reverse the trend, it's still not enough. Japan's population is declining. Greece, total fertility rate of 1.41 children per woman, impacted by prolonged economic challenges. Costa Rica, total fertility rate, Costa Rica, of 1.43 childbirths per woman, lower than regional averages in Latin America. Number 19 on the list, the Bahamas, total fertility rate of 1.44 children per woman, showing a continued decline from previous decades. And number 20, Belarus, total fertility rate of 1.44 childbirths per woman, with relatively stable but sub-replacement fertility. And Belarus, we mentioned also yesterday, I think I did mention it yesterday, has the lowest maternal mortality rate of any nation in the world. Belarus, of 100,000 live births, only one woman loses her life during her fertility or childbearing age time. Now we understand that childbearing age time only produces 1.44 children per that era. But congratulations to Belarus for at least protecting the women, whereas the worst nation in the world was Sudan, or actually South Sudan, with a total maternal mortality rate of 1,223 deaths per woman during their childbearing years, compared to just one death per 100,000 live births in Belarus. A couple more nations I'm going to put there. Well, I'm going to put one more nation here up on this. United States, total fertility rate projected to average around 1.7 childbirths per woman in the coming decades, below the replacement level of 2.1. The 2025 estimate is consistent with recent trends showing sub-replacement fertility. The only group with positive replacement levels for fertility in the United States, last time I checked, was Hispanic immigrants at 2.1 childbirths per woman. Hispanic immigrants were absolutely sustaining their population. And of course, the Hispanics lift up the total United States total fertility rate. United States population growth remains positive due to sustained net immigration. Despite a negative natural increase, more deaths than births expected from persistently low fertility. The 2025 population is estimated at 347,275,807, with growth supported by immigration. Immigration is supporting what little childbirth is occurring in the United States. I hope you find this to be fantastic. Let me see if I can get some comments from you, our listeners. I see Stray Godzilla is in the house. On our YouTube page, he writes, sounds like the movie Children of Men, when the earth couldn't have babies. I saw that, and I guess I gotta go back and look at it again and see if it predicted or if it was accurate enough for us to be able to use. Thank you for mentioning that. Good job, Stray Godzilla. I'm going to Rumble. I want to see what you have to say. For Africa, when I see girls wearing physical and psychological destruction, we read that, in their plastic nails, hair, and eyelashes, how do we convince them and their parents of the ticking time bombs they're nurturing? You're right, because of the quinoculon, the plastic hair, is what's called organic chemistry. And we do know from the book of Rachel Carson, did I pull that book off the shelf? Yeah, I did. From Rachel Carson's book, which is entitled, do I have it here? It's somewhere here. I have a bunch of books here. Let me show you what I have here. Rachel Carson's book is entitled Silent Spring. I know I have it over here on this bookshelf. Should be jumping right out me. Silent Spring, there it is. I think. Silent Spring by Rachel Carson is a very, very important book. And I don't see it up here. But the book deals with the rapid corruption of the environment. And Rachel Carson's book is from the early 1960s. I think it was 1963 she published it. And at the time, it was becoming evident in the Great Lakes region, where the water was so contaminated that the animals that were living in the area were starting to mutate. And they were starting to show bizarre sexual behavior. And not much respect to Rachel Carson for writing that book. Later, there was another book called Silent Spring, 1963 by Rachel Carson. The other book was Our Stolen Future by Rachel Carson and by Theo Colburn. She had another writer, whose name I can't recall right now. Theo Colburn's book, pointed out that fertility rates have declined very dramatically and that the sperm count that modern men were having, this book is written in the mid 1990s, their modern men had a sperm count about 50% that of their grandfathers from just 3 decades or a generation or two before. 50% reduction in sperm counts. And unfortunately, it's still continuing to decline. Excuse me, Mom, my phone freaks out over here. And where we at? No need to pay attention to that. So we are now a couple more books. I'm going to talk about excessive force, power, politics, and population growth. This from the Information Project for Africa. This is where I learned this research. I first started studying demographics and population shifts from the Information Project for Africa. Elizabeth Liaga-Nsofo wrote the book. She writes, she has a couple of quotes she shares on the back from Alfred Savoy in La Face Programme de la Population Mondiale, the face of the problem of population worldwide. It creates a very disagreeable impression to see people who are white, European, or of European origin trying to sow the seeds of sterility in populations that are about to escape from under their domination. Very important. That escape from under domination is due to the fact that we, the people of color, are going to continue to have births. On the back cover of the book, she writes, how would the American people react if their government told them exactly how many children they should or should not have? And what would be their response if these orders came not from their own leaders, but from a foreign power intent on maximizing its increase, its access to natural resources, maintaining political domination, and imposing its culture by force? How would we react? It is not surprising that the peoples of the Southern Hemisphere have stubbornly resisted efforts by the West to introduce coercive limits to fertility. But what will surprise many readers is the extent of the involvement of many of the so-called secret agencies of government and the lengths to which policymakers in wealthy countries will go to prevent births among persons of color. In fact, world political leaders, now at the brink of desperation, are motivated by the belief that the existing balance of political and economic power can only be preserved into the next century by a new colonial system, one in which reproductive control is the central concern. That introduction to the book. And this book is really serious, very serious. I have 2 or 3 copies of it. But this book is very rare now. And I can tell this copy here is starting to get a little tattered around the edges. But let me see if I can just pull out a little bit about what it has to say about population. To the average person, birth control is something intensely personal. In other words, most of us would feel terribly out of place lecturing others about their fertility, and to proclaim publicly that this group or that group is reproducing itself too fast puts a person in an awkward position. Similarly stated, it is the insensitive, it is judicial, and it smacks of prejudice. But private as it is, human reproduction is also intensely political. It has been said that because all of us will eventually pass away, procreation determines the future of nations. Here is the key to understanding the exceptional interest that this issue generates among Western policy planners. And carefully monitored birth rates around the world suggest that some truly meaningful changes are about to take place in the future of nations and in the relative advantages enjoyed by different regions. Since the start of the 20th century, birth rates in the industrialized world have fallen to levels that are the lowest anywhere in all history. At the same time, fertility has stayed high in much of the developing world. This means that the constituency of the world is likely to change in ways that are difficult to imagine. The following pages offer a brief history of the American Foreign Aid Program with an emphasis on the objectives and consequences for the emerging nations of the South. It then reviews our opinion about the importance of population change presented over the past half century by an assortment of scientists, academics, experts, panels, military officials, and political leaders. What happens when there are dramatic shifts in the world's ethnic and racial makeup? How will these trends alter the balance of power between North and South? What effect will population change have on the global distribution of wealth, resources, and technology? Who will rule the world our children inherit? Who will rule the world our children inherit? That's a very, very important question. It's a loud question. It's a question that demands you and I respond to it. I'm going to share a couple of quotes from the first chapter of the book, Bosses Without Visas, Politics by Outsiders. The first quote she has here is from Albert McMount, quoted in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Quote, "The most serious blow suffered by the colonized is being removed from history and from the community. Colonization usurps any free role in either war or peace, every decision contributing to his destiny and that of the world, and all cultural and social responsibility." And then she has this brief quote here from Henry Kissinger: "Since absolute security for one power means absolute insecurity for all others, it is attainable only through conquest, never as part of a legitimate settlement." That from Henry Kissinger in World Politics. And the last quote from Bertrand Russell: It cannot be expected that the most powerful military nations will sit still while other nations reverse the balance of power by the mere process of breeding. Yeah, that is very, very important. That book. I have a few more books here. I'm just going to mention the books and then get out of here. The Evolution of Civilizations is a very, very, very important book written by Carol Quigley, who is the author of Tragedy and Hope. And this book gives you the different stages that civilizations go through in their rise, their pinnacle of power, and ultimately their decline. And when it comes to demography, that is a very, very important part of the entire process. And let me see, do I have anything in here? Oh, I don't have a demographic index in here, but demographics, very important, from Carol Quigley, The Evolution of Civilizations. This book, I do want to cite this. You've heard this on LIB Radio many times over the course of the years that you have been listening to LIB Radio. I have shared the following paragraph numerous times, and I'm right now going to share it one more time. We're going to chapter 7. The book is entitled the book is entitled An American Dilemma, The Negro Problem and Modern Democracy. That's the subtitle of the single volume. This is a 2-volume where they split it up into the Negro in a White Nation for the first part. But the title of the main book is A Clash of Civilizations, the Negro Problem, and Modern Democracy. And on page 167, they talk about population. They start talking about it on page 163. Let me share one paragraph. Let's see if I can get in and get out. One paragraph on page 165, the subtitle of this chapter, Summary. Popular theories on the growth of the Negro population in America have been diverse. At times, it has been claimed that Negroes, quote, breed like rabbits, unquote, and that they will ultimately crowd out the whites if they are not deported or their procreation restricted. At other times, it has been proclaimed that they are a dying race, bound to lose out in the struggle for survival. Statistics, both of the comprehensive kind in the U.S. Census and the limited kind gathered in sample surveys, have been used to bolster both arguments. I'm going to skip now to page 167. The subtitle of the chapter is Ends and Means in Population Policy. That's an action agenda. Skipping down to the third paragraph. If we forget about the means for the moment and consider only the quantitative goal for Negro population policy, there is no doubt that the overwhelming majority of white Americans desire that there be as few Negroes as possible in America. If the Negroes could be eliminated from America or greatly decreased in numbers, this would meet the whites' approval, provided that it could be accomplished by means which are also approved. Correspondingly, an increase in the proportion of Negroes in the American population is commonly looked upon as undesirable. These opinions are seldom expressed publicly, as the opinions, for reasons which we shall develop, are not practicable either. They are not much in the forefront of public attention, but as a general valuations, they are nearly always present. Commonly, it is considered a great misfortune for America that Negro slaves were ever imported. The presence of Negroes in America today is usually considered as a plight of the nation, and particularly of the South. It should be noted that the general evaluation of the desirability of a decrease of the Negro population is not necessarily hostile to the Negro people. It is shared even by enlightened white Americans who do not hold the common belief that Negroes are inferior as a race. Usually, it is pointed out that Negroes fare better and meet less prejudice when they are few in number. Then I will do now as I usually do. I'll skip to page 167, 2 pages later. At first, the first excerpt began with the sentence, if we forget about the means for the moment and consider only the quantitative goal for Negro population policy. Well, this next section now goes to the means, the methodologies, the policies to bring this off. In our further discussion of the means in Negro population policy, we might start out from the desire of the politically dominant white population to get rid of the Negroes. This is a goal difficult to reach by approved means, and the desire has never been translated into action directly, and probably never will be. All the most obvious means go strongly against the American creed. The Negroes cannot be killed off. Compulsory deportation would infringe upon personal liberty in such a radical fashion that it is excluded. Voluntary exportation of Negroes could not be carried on extensively because of unwillingness on the part of recipient nations as well as on the part of the American Negroes themselves, who usually do not want to leave the country but prefer to stay and fight it out here. Neither is it possible to effectuate the goal by keeping up the Negro death rate. A high death rate is an unhumanitarian and undemocratic way to restrict the Negro population and, in addition, expensive to society and dangerous to the white population. The only possible way of decreasing the Negro population is by means of controlling fertility. But, as we shall find, even birth control for Negroes as well as for whites will in practice have to be considered primarily as a means to other ends than that of decreasing the Negro population. In the final analysis, all of these theoretically possible policies to effectuate the white desire to decrease the Negro population are blocked by the American creed, except birth control, which is, however, largely attached to other ends. And it goes on and on and on and on. It's a very compelling chapter. The book is 1,438 pages in the single volume edition. Let's begin to wrap it up. More books I have, just a couple. I'm just going to name them. This one, COVID-19, The Great Reset. They said it straight out, The Great Reset, by Klaus Schwab and Thierry Mallory from the World Economic Forum. I don't have any teasers and quotes from this one. Yes, I do. This teaser and quote appears on a dog-eared page, which I don't dog-ear very much. But it says, in this messy new world, defied by shift toward multipolarity and increased competition for influence, the conflicts or tensions will no longer be driven by ideology, with the partial and limited exception of radical Islam, but spurred by nationalism and the competition for resources. No one power can enforce order. Our world will suffer from a global order deficit. Unless individual nations and international organizations succeed in finding solutions to better collaborate at the global level, we risk entering an age of entropy, quote unquote, in which retrenchment, fragmentization, anger, and parochialism will increasingly define our global landscape, making it less parochialism, making it less an age in which retrenchment, fragmentation, anger, and parochialism will increasingly define our global landscape, making it less intelligible and more disorderly. The pandemic crisis has both exposed and exacerbated this and sad state of affairs. The magnitude and consequence of the shock it has inflicted are such that no extreme scenario can now be taken off the table. The implosion of some failing states or petro-states, the possible unraveling of the EU, a breakdown between China and the US that leads to war. All these and many more have now become plausible, albeit hopefully unlikely scenarios. So it talks then about these different aspects of this new world that they imagine, the global reset. And two more books I'm going to mention that I think are very important. One, Africa Rising, How 900 Million Africans Consumers Offer More Than You Think. And the back cover are just a bunch of quotes. A very good book. It's not a perfect book, but I like the book. Profit from the world's largest untapped market. Africa has more than 900 million consumers. Now Africa has over 1.54 billion population, of which most of them are consuming something or another. And then the one more book, this is very telling, goes right to the point. The title tells it all. What to Expect When No One is expecting? Where are you at, book? What to expect when no one is expecting America's coming demographic disaster? America's coming demographic disaster. Let me read the back of the book. Look around you and think for a minute. Is America too crowded? For years, we have been warned about the looming danger of overpopulation, people jostling for space on a planet that's bustling at the seams and running out of oil and food and land and everything else. It's all bunk. The quote, population bomb never exploded. Instead, statistics from around the world made clear that since the 1970s, we have been facing exactly the opposite problem. People are having too few babies. Population growth rate has been slowing for 2 generations. The world's population will peak and then begin shrinking before the end of the century. In some countries, it's already started. In Japan, people buy more adult diapers than they do diapers for babies. In Italy, there are already more deaths than births every year. China's one-child policy has left that country without enough women to marry its men, not enough young people to support the country's elderly, and an impending population contraction that has the ruling class terrified. And all of this is coming to America too. In fact, it's already here. Middle class Americans have their own informal one-child policy these days. And an alarming number of upscale professionals don't even go that far. They have dogs, not kids. In fact, if it weren't for the wave of immigration we've experienced over the last 30 years, the United States would be on the verge of shrinking too. What happened? Everything about modern life, from boogaloo strollers to insane college tuition to government regulations, has pushed Americans in a single direction, making it harder to have children and making the people who still do want to have children feel like second-class citizens. What to expect when no one's expecting explains why the population implosion happened and how it is remaking culture, the economy, and politics, both at home and around the globe. Because if America wants to contribute to lead the world, continue to lead the world, we need to have more babies. This book, written by Jonathan V. Last, senior writer at the Weekly Standard and other journals, etc. Jonathan V. Last. This is a very good book. What to expect when no one is expecting. So I have gone through an extensive list of books for today. I have my own books: Fade to Black, Population War, Report from the Front Line, Missing Assets. I will put my books on the table next to any of these other books. I will say that I have done my best to contribute to this beautiful body of literature. You can get access to my books on the population issue at http://keidi.biz/CRP 2012. Again, you can get my books at http://keidi.biz Conscious Rasta Press 2012. That's where you're going to get my books. I highly recommend. If you can, please do. Straight Godzilla in the house. Sounds like, oh, we read that one. He says, very informative, great show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you, Straight Godzilla. And I probably know who you are, but I don't recognize the name Straight Godzilla. But that's okay. You can be anonymous if you choose. And lastly, going to the Rumble, I see one more comment from our sister for Africa One. And I want to thank you both for being a part of the conversation today, for contributing to the conversation. It's very, very important that we do have people who do contribute. For Africa One writes the following: Western governments that promote the glibet agenda and want to maintain their population growth appear to be suffering cognitive dissonance. You're absolutely right. Cognitive dissonance. Now, the fact of the matter is that the liberal governments they're forced to, because of their rhetorical stance, they're forced to support the glibet agenda, as well as they have to preserve their national strength, their sovereignty, their national security, which is contrary to what the glibets will offer. And of course, the glibet agenda will be represented in military strength, but that plays out in this generation. That ain't going to last for a whole generation. And even then, there ain't enough glibets to take over the military or to bolster it up. So you're right, for Africa One. They have painted themselves in a corner, and quite simply, they're not going to do very, very well with it all. On that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in for today's broadcast. It has been a good day. Didn't even have to use my AK, as Ice Cube might say. And we're going to do the best we can in all the things that we do when we get together with you to do the do. So tell your friends about the show. Tell them to invite more people to visit the show, to listen to LIB Radio. And on that note, I think we have gotten to it all today. LIB Radio, LIB TV, livinginblack.com. It's a beautiful thing we have here, for which we are wonderfully, eternally grateful. On your favorite, tell everybody you know that we aim to be your favorite LIB Radio, LIB TV, livinginblack.com. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.